Okay, so this is the Sakai Gradebook presented by the Office of E-Learning. So we're going to get started. This is being recorded. We are two instructional designers. So I'm Corey Bauer. I was a former social studies and computer science teacher, and now I design courses at West Liberty. Amanda was also one of my co-teachers. She's a former science teacher and ed tech coach, and she will be moderating today. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and stop me at any point. Both are acceptable. This is scheduled for 1 hour. We may do it in a little bit less. If you want to open another tab and do some of these things in the Sakai Gradebook while we're doing it, that would be helpful for you. And if you want further information about how we can help you with specific courses or things in your gradebook, you can contact us and we can work up with you one-on-one. So there are some learning objectives today. We're going to explain the benefits of using the gradebook in Sakai. All the LMSs have it, like Canvas and Schoology and Blackboard. How to set up those initial settings and the options you have specifically in the gradebook for Sakai. How you can tie the tools of assignments, discussions, and the quizzes, test and quizzes tool to the gradebook so grades will sync there automatically. And how you can add other tools within Sakai to also do grades. We'll also demonstrate how you could grade these things and be more proficient and faster at it, because grading does take a lot of time. And then you'll be able to identify at least 2 management tools within Sakai for grades. So first, we're going to set up your gradebook, which is something you do initially at each term. So gradebooks are awesome because they do a lot of the math for you. And when you are using tools such as assignments and discussions and the quizzes, when those things are graded, the scores dump into the Sakai gradebook, so you don't have to manually transfer them. It'll also keep a running total of your grades in your gradebook, even if you have categories or weights. And the students always have access to them, which is really the big sell for using the gradebook. The students have instant access all the time. As long as your grades are been recorded, students can also see them. And down the road, should the university go to a data retention service, which is going to scan all the grades in Sakai and is looking for those very low grades like D's and F's. So it can send out automatic alerts to the students, to academic advisors and instructors about these students may need help. They're not doing so well, but it's going to be based on the math that exists in Sakai. So as we try to build gradebook usage throughout the university, it will be for this purpose, trying to retain students and make sure they're successful with these grades. So when you set up a gradebook, the tool is going to look like this on your left side panel. It also may be named grades depending on how your specific tool is named, because you can customize that in Sakai. So the first step is you have these 5 settings here that you need to deal with. You don't have to do all of them, but there are some that have basic settings for you already. The most common entry is going to be points. You have 10 out of 10 points, you have 5 out of 10, and that's how the math works on the back end for calculating the overall grade. If you have a master course that's dumped into your current course, those things have already been set because they've been developed as an approved course, and so you may not have to touch those. These are really for if you want to customize some things or you're building a course from scratch yourself, particularly for the face-to-face courses. When you go to the grade release rules, when the grade is recorded by Sakai, by the instructor, those grades can be held or released to the students. And so a benefit of that is if you are grading, say, a writing piece and you want to look through as an instructor and make sure you were consistent in grading and your grades were sort of similar before you release the grade to the students, it kind of makes sure you're a little bit more objective rather than just firing off scores that go to the students. So if you want the gradebook to release them to the students, you'll check this box. And you can also show how those students or how those grades are shown to students. The most common is going to be a letter grade or percentage. You can do points if you want, but students are more familiar with A, B, so on. And although Sakai can do pluses and minuses, West Liberty doesn't actually use those in grades. So 90s are all A's, 80s are all B's, and so on. So you don't necessarily have to factor those out, but they are an option. And you can also do statistics. This is an instructor preference, it's not required, but if you would like to show students the data of how all the other students did on a particular assignment, you can allow them to see that, especially if there was a wide range or if they were pretty consistent, and also course grades. Now, the smaller class you have, you may want to stay away from this because it'll be easy to kind of identify who may among themselves not be doing so well. But if you have a very large class, the statistics are kind of helpful for students sometimes, but that is totally an instructor preference. Now, weights and categories is a big topic here, and there's multiple ways to customize this. It's going to default to no categories first, but you can create categories just so you can organize your gradebook so it's a much cleaner look for the instructor and also for the students on the back end. When you have categories, you can give them whatever names you want. Most common are exams, assignments, discussions, and so on. And as you build entries into the gradebook, it will calculate how many items are in that category. Now, if you want to reorganize these, so these are drag and drops here. So if you want to see in your gradebook when it goes linear across your screen, the ones that you may be using the most to hand grade, like discussions, you might want on at the top there. Ones that are going to automatically grade for themselves, like quizzes, where the scores are automatically dumped in, you may want those to the back end of your gradebook because you won't be seeing them very much manually. And you can add as many categories as you like. You can organize them in any way you like. And you can update these throughout the course. It really doesn't change anything. It's just a display option. Now, when you add categories and weighting, what this does is you can still organize the order of the categories and determine how many items are in that category. But your percentages, which will ask you once you click the categories and weighting, it'll ask you a percentage. It has to equal 100%. You can give any category like a 1 to a 99%, but together they must be 100. And once you have categories or categories and weighting, every item in your gradebook must be attached to a category for it to factor into the gradebook. So one of the most common tickets that we get is that something's not factoring into the final grade, and it's almost always because that item is not listed to a category, so the math is not happening. It's just kind of hanging out there. Even though it displays in the gradebook, it's not participating in the gradebook in a way. And every category must have at least one item in the category. So you can go ahead and create categories with weighting and not put anything in it until you come to that assignment within the course. But at the end, it will need something to factor all together. Now, here's where I was mentioning about how the gradebook looks for the instructor. The default view is horizontal, left to right, and you can move individual items across. And you can even move the categories around if you want to. But when you shift things around to left or right, you can do so one by one. Typically, most instructors like to go by dates. And your categories will be grouped together. So if you have 38 items in your gradebook, and you would have these options down here at the bottom, you could group them by category. So everything that is an assignment will go together in a list. Everything that's a quiz will go together in a list. Everything that's a discussion forum and so on. And so what that does is when a student looks at the gradebook, they will see up and down in these categories in a very clean format. And then they can see how many points and the rubrics in the gradebook. If there's a little icon like this, a rubric is attached to that assignment, which I'll get to in a little bit, and the dates and the points here. So it's very easy and clean and customizable for the instructor of how they want it to be laid out. And then if you want to see your grade statistics without actually turning them on for the students, you can also do that too. Now let's get into the assignments tool and how this works with Sakai. So the most common assignment is based on points, but you do have other options. So when you are creating an assignment in the tool, it's going to ask you if you want to grade this assignment, and here are your options. So if you do points, you have to give a total, and that total has a red asterisk because it's a required piece of data. You can also do a check mark if it was something for completion, like you turned in a filtered form or you have a paper signed to do something in your program or something like that. It will put it in the grade book, but the math will not be participating. So it's just kind of like a reminder for students, here's what you need to do. Sometimes if you have a rough draft version, you might want to do a check mark, and then the real assignment is going to have points, and both could be in your grade book if you wanted to do so. When you get down to this gray box, it's asking you some very specific things about this assignment. Do you want to use a rubric? You can have rubrics created in Sakai, which are really just charts with boxes. And if you have pre-made them, you can just attach them here. This saves you time of having to upload a paper attachment that's a rubric, and it allows you to use the same rubric multiple times for multiple assignments, and even use it across multiple courses. And what that does is when the instructor goes to grade this assignment, that box will pop up with the chart, and the instructor just has to click on the box to grade. And that math will happen in the background and give a total score at the end, and then the instructor can release that to the grade book. So it's very helpful rather than trying to circle on a paper, scan it, attach it back to the students to see how it was graded. So this will speed up your grading. And if you do forget what was in that specific rubric, if this button was selected, this will be highlighted and you could see a little preview of it. And the most important part is you want to release the items to the gradebook. So here is where, when you are grading this assignment and you entered a 20 or a 15 or whatever, it's going to dump that score into the gradebook for you, for the student. So it will also create, so if we are creating an assignment here, it will also create the item in the gradebook for you. So that's very helpful, saves you some time. Now I have an asterisk down here by this peer assessment. This is an additional tool to assignments. So for example, if a student was to write a paper and attach their writing to the submission, the peer assignment would open as soon as the assignment deadline passed. So say your assignment was due on a Sunday night. Monday morning, that assignment would open, and the students who submitted the assignments would be able to access each other's attachments and do peer reviews. And they could attach whatever they wanted to write about that student's evaluation and attach it back. And I use the asterisks here because if a student doesn't do the initial assignment, they can't do the peer assessment either. They're kind of locked out of both. And so if you're grading both of those as activities, the student is now going to get 0 on both of them. So the suggested alternative for coming from Sakai is to use a discussions tool, because you can pop in and out. And even if you didn't participate, you can go back in and pop in and attach your assignment. So if you were a little bit late, you could still do the peer assessment in that way. So it is kind of a cautionary tale when using that particular box. Now Turnitin, our subscription changed over the summer. So Turnitin is the plagiarism detector tool, and what they've added this year is AI. So when you go into an assignment and you click the Turnitin box to use it in an assignment, you have a much simpler options here. So what we're paying for is the ability for Turnitin to see the assignments in Sakai, generate a report of similarity for the instructors and students to see. This means students and instructors don't go out to Turnitin.com and do stuff here. It's kind of baked into our LMS. And so now with our subscription with the AI included, we can exclude some things that would probably be similar on an assignment, like the bibliography or quotes for something that would be common. And we can get a similarity report immediately. And so what it is it's taking the paper submission that's text, comparing it to 20 years of submissions and Turnitin, and looking for passages that are similar or word for word, and it will color code it and give you a score. What it's also going to do now is give you an AI score, and this also has an asterisk, is that it's looking for the specific text in the student's assignment and it's using an algorithm to determine whether they think that it was an AI written with like ChatGPT or something. It's got an asterisk because the turn-in is claiming it is 98% accurate, but it's also based on ChatGPT 3 and 3.5, which was up till November 2021, and now ChatGPT is kind of coming out very fast and furious with updates, so it may be accurate, may not. So what Turnitin is suggesting to instructors is you use the score as not a penalty to the students, but rather a conversation starter. So if 90% of their assignment was possibly an AI written thing, maybe you'd want to talk to the student about, did they use it? What were they doing with it? But not necessarily punish the student outright, because it could be inaccurate, because it is kind of a changing technology at this point. But we do have this in. The students don't see the AI score. So when the instructor sees it on their panel, they could screenshot it and use it as a conversation starter to say, hey, 90% came up for you. But we also have Turnitin draft back coach for students, where they can see a similarity score as they're writing their paper. If they're using Microsoft OneDrive in the online version, so they can kind of correct themselves before they officially turn in and get an assignment score. But they don't get the AI score because we're kind of not promoting just yet that we have some sort of detection. Now, when you have assignments with submissions, when you are in your assignments tool and you have the listing here, you're going to have this in and new, and this will be a live counter of how many students have submitted completely an assignment. So in this case, there was 5 in, 5 have not been graded, and this will count as you actually enter the scores. There is an option for instructors. How often do you want to be bugged by every submission? So if you have a small class and it's very time consuming and you want to grade as soon as things come in, you may want a notification every time someone submits. But if you have a large class and you don't plan on grading anything until after the due date on your own time, you don't want to be notified with these emails because it'll come into your inbox. And this will tell you if the assignment had an attachment. If there was a rubric, the icon would also be here. You could click on the assignment, you could click view submissions, you could click over here. There's multiple ways to get to the actual student submissions. And so as this screenshot was taken, there was an open date and a close date. And for right now, this is closed, showing you that the students can no longer submit to it, but you can grade as it comes in, even before the due date. So when you have all these assignments and submissions, you will see the student rosters over here, and you can see that they have attached some kind of file, Word document, PDF, or whatever. You can see the due date, and if students were actually late, it will notify you, so you do know that as an instructor. And once you have graded them, it will also track this for you. And any one of these blue underlined items can be clicked and resorted, so you can see your data in a different way. And then your grades are here. And then there is a check mark here saying that, yes, you did release the grades to the students. They can see them. It's in the grade book. And you can also see that one did not submit. There is no data here. So that student did not actually submit anything, regardless of what they might tell you. And you can also click on these or click the box to open them. When you go to grade a specific assignment, you have multiple ways to get to it. So you can click on the name, you can click on the attachment, whatever. You can also navigate by just who has turned stuff in. So if you just want to roll through them, that way you can. When you open the submission, the student had an attachment. Here's the name of it. You can click it to open. You can give them feedback. You could attach feedback if you wanted to do so. It's the same text box that you use in Sakai to add content to your modules. So all the same tools are there. You can add pictures, videos, links, whatever you need to. It'll tell you the total score. You can put your grade in there and then save it. So when you want to, especially writing, you want to grade things consistently, you can put in a grade and it holds it privately for the instructor, but not for the student. So if you wanted to save this score and move on to the next student and then release, you would have these options down here to click that. And if a student just really bombed an assignment, you could allow that one person to resubmit based on the feedback. So it will kind of open up that one student for that one assignment to attach something again. Now let's go to the test and quizzes tool. When you create one in Sakai and you have a quiz item, in the scoring, you want to send the items to the gradebook. So if you have a multiple choice, true or false or whatever, it's going to grade for you. It's going to have a score. Once that student submits, it automatically goes to the gradebook. So this is actually the most easiest for instructors because you're kind of hands off once you've built it. And if you have created categories, you want to make sure that it's going to the right category because it could grade the assignment. But if you didn't put a category in, if that's how you set up your gradebook, the grade will be there, but it won't be factoring in anywhere. So this is important if you set your gradebook up that way. You have these options if you want to send feedback to the students that are automatically based on their score or the question, but you do have to build those when you build the test. But for most instructors, they just want the yes or no, right or wrong. If the student really bombs, then you can go back and kind of assess what they did wrong. You can also see scores about how many did well in this question, what was a really high question that had a good response. So you can see that data on the back end if you want to change the quizzes for the next time. Now, discussions tool is a little different than the assignments and quizzes tool. It does work alone and it does work with the gradebook, and it depends on how you've set it up. So when you go to the gradebook, discussions is not going to automatically go into the gradebook like quizzes does. Here you will have to manually create a gradebook item. And when you do so in the gradebook tool and you go to grades and you're going to add an item, this window pops up. It's very simple. You have your title, you have to have your points, you have a rubric option or not, the due date, and the category if you have that set up. You can also release the item to students once the score is put in. And if you want it to calculate, you can include it, or you can just have it out there as, you know, kind of for just talking about frequently asked questions or something like that in your class. Most discussions are usually categories themselves, and instructors use them in their gradebook. Some of them weight them, some don't. If you've created your rubrics ahead of time, you can add it the same way you do as assignments. There's the preview button if you forget what was on that rubric, and it will calculate for you. So as you're grading the discussions and putting in the scores, if you're clicking on the rubric and the math was adding for you, and you put it in the little box, save and release, it's going to go right into the gradebook for you and students can see. So when you are looking at discussions, it takes a little more effort to grade because you're looking at activity across multiple postings. So it is a little bit more intensive than quizzes. When you have created a gradebook item, which is a placeholder for this discussion score, when you go into discussions and you click on someone's post, there's a grade button here. And what that will bring up is your rubric, if you attached it, and you can see the points and you can add comments about why you gave them that score, if they did something really well, if there's something that they needed to do a little bit better to get a better score or what you were expecting from them, this will be here. And then as you can see the person's initial post, most discussions are set up to where students need to respond to 2 or more people. You can see the responses that are indented here that are in response to the original one. So as you're grading, before you can kind of assess how the person did completely, if you're grading on how busy they were in the discussion, you might want to look for their name across the discussion post to see, did they really contribute to the conversation? Did they have multiple responses to other people? Did they follow up on the questions that they were asked? So it's a little bit more intensive than that. And then when you have your item in the gradebook, it's whatever you called it, and there's the rubric again. And this indicator here that the instructor did put some comments in this box, and you can go back and see them, and the student can see them also. I'm not going to show this video here, but it is a short video that's included about if you want to take somebody else's rubric. We do have a lot of basic rubrics that come in a basic template, but if somebody used a different rubric, if it's for your program or your department or whatever, we have people that have shared across the institution in the public rubric site, and you can take them and make a copy into your course. Once you make that copy, you can change it in any way that you want to, and it doesn't affect the original version. So some of them use them as kind of a starting point. So you can watch this at your own leisure. Next slide. You can also create your own. This will show you how to get into the rubrics tool, create how many criteria and points that you want, what order do you want it to have. You can also print out your rubric, so a PDF form if you wanted to show students. But when students see their assignment or their discussion, when they go into the assignments or discussions tool and the rubric is attached, they can also see the rubric before they actually do the assignment, so they know what they're being critiqued on. So that is a best practice to remind students of that. So now that you have all these tools, they're gathering data. Now what happens? There are other things that you could add into your gradebook that if you're using an outside tool that doesn't work in Sakai, like a Pearson some website or Cengage, or you have an EdTech tool, those are all going to be manual gradebook items that you add into the gradebook, and then you grade them wherever they are on the internet, and then you put the score in, so it'll factor in. This is a session that we did earlier this year about how to add those other tools. What are those tools? What do they do? So you can watch that one on your own time also. You can also take attendance in Sakai, and often face-to-face courses have this as a graded item. It's totally up to you. So for the face-to-face and hybrid courses, you have these options of whether they were there, were they late, did they leave, or whatever, and you can add a comment for each day. So when you add a manual gradebook item that's attendance, you could do one every week or day, or just overall attendance at the end. Your students will be here. You can quickly check, what they were as you go down the roster. And then you can decide to give it a weight if you want, or a total amount of points at the end. When you do a grade report, so throughout the semester, you start having this data come in, you can kind of look at it to assess some things. So you could see everyone who is submitted by an assignment, or everything a student submitted individually. So in this case, this is a student who you can see their papers when they were doing it. They did have one that was late. These red icons indicate it was a Turnitin assignment that went through the scoring process. This one wasn't graded, but it wasn't didn't have any points. It was a checkmark item. This one has not been graded, or just has no grade here. And there's attachments to what the original assignment posting was. So if you wanted to see if a student was turning in assignments frequently and then dropped off, this submit date would help you see that. Maybe there was something going on. You could reach out to the student. So it's kind of an advisory tool in that way. And you can also see, are they doing really good with papers and really bad with discussions, or vice versa? So it's kind of great data for the instructor. When you get to the end of the course, you have all your grades in Sakai, everything is factored correctly, they have to go somewhere. So at the end of the term, you have everything factored for you in Sakai. You're going to go to our WIN system, which is the West Liberty Information Network system. And because you will have this final grade in Sakai already shown for you, if you open two windows, one for WINS and one for Sakai, and just roll through your roster and manually put those grades in, it will really save you a lot of time because it's already factored for you. And then, should these grades that go to the registrar and end up on transcripts be challenged by a student down the road, if the data is still in Sakai, because we don't delete any data, we will hold these courses for, some of them are going on 10 or more years now. That data is there with all the assignments and discussions that they did or maybe didn't do. So if the student wants to appeal a grade later on, the data is there to back you up, even if you aren't here. So that's kind of why we're pushing the data to be in Sakai, because we're going to host it long-term, because the retention and the appeals do come up sometime. The calendar is also another management tool that's really great. So when you are adding these assignments and discussions and whatnot, you have a little checkbox in the setup window to post it on the calendar of that course. So the splash page for each course that's on the basic template shows a calendar for the course, and so the student can see what's coming up. And so as you build your course and you have all these dates, especially on a master course that everything's coming in, the student can see the entire semester and help that use their time management. There are little icons that, based on what it is that you put on the calendar, will formulate here. So if it was assignment or quiz or whatever, so it can show you something here. There's something coming up for this class. If there are other things you want to put on there, like they need to go find an advisor, they need to meet with somebody by this date, you can also put on the calendar. Things that aren't quite assignments, but they're still kind of tied to everything else. So this is a very powerful tool that instructors can use as well as the students. If you want to learn advanced Sakai tools, because you can get really nitty gritty into some of these assignments and quizzes and things like that, we do have some courses developed in Sakai about taking the idea of a course to getting it off the ground and actually having the full usage of Sakai in there. We have additional trainings coming up the rest of the semester on Thursdays at 10 that we can put you in there if you wanted to see some of these and work through your own pace. And if you have any Sakai questions, something didn't work, something's not calculating, submit us a ticket. We respond every day of the year. On weekends and holidays, it may be not quite as fast, but we do answer the tickets as best as possible. And we can sit down and look at your course individually to look at. Amanda, did we have any questions? Because I kind of did do that a little fast.
We didn't have any questions in the chat, but Chris, do you have any questions or anything like that? I know it's a lot.
Yeah.
Great
No, that's fine. I'm familiar. So I mean, I had adjuncted previously, and I actually oversaw the facilitation of the College 101 program. So I've used a lot of the tools in Sakai. And these are the functions today or items I'm pretty comfortable with. Did have a couple small questions. And that is there any way, and this because I encountered this semester, is there any way to make a bulk change to unassigned items if they were built into the grade book without being assigned to a category after it's already in the grade book, to do that in bulk, or is that something individually you have to do?
So when you mean bulk added, what do you mean? Like these were all forums that were added that you don't want, or?
No, just bulk editing them into a category, I guess I would say. So they came into the gradebook unassigned. And it was, I think specifically what I'm looking at this time is, I think they were quizzes, and they were bulk. They were just in the gradebook as unassigned, and I had to go into each quiz and then assign it to the quizzes section or category.
I believe you have to manually assign them because each item has so many granular settings.
Okay.
And that is kind of unfortunate. But I do know once things are in a grade book, you can bulk change the dates.
Yeah.
So like it has to be in there, and then you can change it, but you can't change the the categories.
Okay. Kind of I was just curious. Like I said, I went in and made the changes manually, one by one. I just didn't know if there's a way to do it.
That would be a great feature, and I can suggest it to Sakai because since it's open source, they take a lot of suggestions, and if other schools kind of we can take these suggestions and they kind of go to like a voting process, and that might be one that's very helpful because it is tedious to change all of those at one time.
Yeah, and then another item, just because I know it's possible, but I have not gone through personally the details and the nitty-gritty of how to do this. An example I'll use is, say there's an attendance grade, or there are points accumulated for attendance, and they start at X amount, we'll just say 100. And then after so many absences, students lose the points, we'll just say after 3 absences, 3 unexcused absences, students will lose 5 points per absence after that third. Is there a way to build that into the grade book, or into the grade book with the attendance feature?
Since right now it's a manual gradebook item that only updates manually, there isn't.
Okay.
But that also could be a feature because it could be, if Sakai could build the feature to be calculating points, but then also negative points. So the math would work. That's something we could also suggest and see if other schools
Yeah.
would
Because
support
I've
it.
done it manually in the past when I've had anything that's tied to attendance and points or accumulation or decrease of points over time. But I didn't know if there was a way to build that in, since I do use the attendance feature for every class. So
Now, there is going to be an update to Sakai within the next year, and we've heard there's major changes, like new tools of what's been requested. I don't know if attendance is one of those things, but since the gradebook is such a heavily used feature, I'm expecting there's probably going to be something useful coming down the pipe. I could suggest that to Sakai, see if other schools are requested it.
those are the only specific things I had down. I mean, like I said, now that I'm full-time faculty, I learn little things here and there just because I'm in Sakai more, and then like maybe one class or two classes a term. So
yeah, and there will be we'll offer this session again, and as more things come out, we'll let you know. Because I think the retention software that push is coming, that the gradebook is going to be more important because it's based fully on the data in there. So we will let you know.
Yeah, and I've had experience with other institutions where they had some of those retention solutions in place, and that was the key pieces were using the attendance features and the grade books.
Yeah.
Because of the alerts that can be initiated by entries.
Yeah, because right now it's just human noticing. It's not very effective. So yeah, that push is coming. I'm not sure what the timeline is, but we will definitely keep you updated. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have one. I'm so sorry I jumped in a little late. I was grading and the time just skipped.
This is recorded, so you'll be able to watch later.
That's what I thought. So for gradebook, you know how for each assignment there is an exempt button. Like for example, if a student cannot participate on something, and I am like manually adding that in a grade because I do a lot of in-class participation. So, but if I, instead of giving a 0 and just leave it blank, because I know that that student was excused that day, how does that impact the grade? And it may be something very silly and simple, but what is the difference between giving it a 0 versus not putting any grade in the grade book?
If you don't add a grade and it's just a placeholder, it does not affect the student's overall grade. Once you put a digit in there, then the factoring starts coming in and the student is has negative consequences. So if you don't intend to put anything in there, I would just leave it blank. The asterisk is fine. The math is not happening if it doesn't exist. But once you put that 0 in, now it starts having consequences down the thing. And I believe there is a setting deep in there that you can exempt that student so it doesn't look like they're missing it. Especially when this retention software comes in. And I think that's depending on what provider is the retention software. I think there may be another tool in there to say exempt this. So it doesn't look like the student's missing a bunch, but if they, they were hospitalized for a week and everything's good, it's okay. They're not really doing bad.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I have been leaving it blank instead of giving a 0 because if they email say, oh, but I really have to get an MRI at that time or something. But I just wanted to double check and make sure that that is a possibility because I heard some other faculty say, well, if I leave it blank, it's going to hurt her grade. And I thought, oh, I don't think that would. Maybe I am doing it wrong.
I mean, it may bother the student looking like there's a demand there, but the math is really what the important piece is.
Yes. Well, thank you. That was my only question.
Okay. Well, we're recording this. We're going to put it on YouTube and our website here later this afternoon. If you have any questions, make a help ticket or email us and we will be glad to help you. And I'm going to stop share and we will send this out to you shortly. Thank you for attending.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.